Welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broken. I'm your host, Jamie Lima, and founder of Allegiant Divorce Solutions, where we help people prepare for, navigate, and recover financially from divorce. This podcast is your one-stop shop for mastering your finances and your life throughout the entire divorce process. In today's episode of Broke Up, Not Broken, we're going to explore the financial and emotional sides of life after divorce. Today's guest is Lindsey Carnick, a licensed clinical social worker and owner of Onward Psychological Services. Lindsay brings a practical and tactical approach to improving mental health with a focus on anxiety and relationship issues that are key stressors for anyone navigating divorce. With a background serving high-stress professionals from attorneys to entrepreneurs, Lindsay is here to share strategies for staying mentally grounded while making tough financial decisions during divorce. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up, and let's once again get you personally and financially empowered. Lindsay, so great to have you here with us today.
Great to be here, Jamie. Thanks. I'm glad I thought about my beverage of choice ahead of time.
Yeah, well, I'm still on coffee. It's still a little early over here, but that may change later depending on how this conversation. Only kidding. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm super appreciative of the work that you do, on the mental health side of things, especially for people that are going through divorce. I mean, my divorce, 8 years ago now was incredibly stressful, incredibly challenging in so many different ways. And if it weren't for folks like you, I don't think I could have survived. So thank you for doing the work that you do.
Oh, well, I'm glad you found somebody who's helpful to you. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the work that you do, right? So we talked to kind of the lead up here to our conversation. So you work with couples primarily, and
couples and individuals, not primarily.
Couples and individuals, and virtually. You're in Colorado Springs, but you work all over the country apparently.
Yes, I'm based in Colorado and I see folks in 10 states. I'm licensed in 10 states.
Amazing. And how did you get into this work? What was your driving force?
Oh, gosh, that's kind of a long and circuitous question and story. I guess not.
We have time.
Story. I don't know if we do. Maybe we could start, maybe we could summarize by saying I'm someone who's always been really interested in the human experience and the stories that we have about the human experience and how we sort of create these narratives to explain our own experience to ourselves and how that implicates and impacts our next set of experiences, right, where we're firing from, which, as I'm sure you're very familiar with, can be a significant factor in how people react, let alone respond to other people after a separation or when they're going through a separation, right? We very easily create very complicated narratives that are always based in a kernel of truth, at least, about the other person and their motivations and what they're doing and what they're trying to do. And then we start reacting according to those narratives, which sometimes have deviated from the facts, and we're still responding to the narrative as opposed to the facts. We've kind of gotten off track. And so I'm very interested in my own life and everyone else's about our capacity to create these storylines and react to those storylines and get further and further away from real lived experience and how damaging that can be.
Yeah. Give me some examples of that, like how it plays out, because I think some of our listeners are living that right now. For
sure. So certainly I want to emphasize that in every storyline we have about another person or an experience, there's always some truth, right? Nothing is a complete fabrication. It always starts out from a place of truth, if we can call anything truth, some sort of objective reality about what happened. Or as they famously said, just the facts, madam, just the facts, right? So there are a set of facts. And then what happens for many of us under many, many conditions is that we start to create our own storyline around those facts that slowly shifts how we perceive the facts and the new things coming in, the new input into the system. So if you are in any kind of relationship, and we could say this for non-romantic relationships, right? Person A does something, person B has some sort of feelings and reaction about that, right? And as person B sort of metabolizes that experience, they start to fill in all sorts of blanks. about why person A did that, what that might mean person A is going to do in the future, what that means about how they think about, you did that, so you must think about me, that da 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 da. And we get these very elaborate storylines about what the other person is thinking, saying, doing, and motivated by, that then create in us all sorts of metabolic responses. And by metabolic, I mean feelings. Yeah. And then that gravely influences how we go back and interact with that person. So if you believe, and we could again say this in about any set of interactions between any two people, that somebody did something because they don't respect you, which is a storyline, by the way. That is a story. That person doesn't respect me. Now, it's a story that may or may not have more or less objective truth, whatever that means, but it is a story about the way things are, which is different from the reality of the way things are. Most people do not get out of bed in the morning thinking, how can I ruin this other person's day? Most people get out of bed in the morning thinking, how can I get my needs met? And sometimes in the course of relentlessly pursuing getting their own needs met, they ruin the other person's day. But usually it's not maliciously intentional. But if you believe, or you start to create a story that says, that person did that set of things because they don't respect me, they don't like me, they don't think I'm smart, they think I could get away with it, they think I'm dumb, they think I'm manipulatable, they think I'm a doormat. You're creating a huge storyline, okay, about how that person operates and the place they're operating from. And that storyline is going to change how you come back to them. So if Jamie, I'm going to use us because it's easy. If I believe that something you did was based out of disrespect for me or a lack of care for me, how I interact with you in the future is going to be very, very different than if I believed you made a mistake, or you had a moment of bad judgment, or any one of a number of other things other than you don't respect me, right? That has deep implications for what I do in terms of interacting with you. And what happens, we have a word for this there's a school of therapy called ACT. And in ACT, we call it fusion and diffusion, where people become fused with their thoughts and they don't recognize them as thoughts. They see them as reality. So I can have a thought about reality. For example, I could have the thought like, oh, it's a beautiful day outside. That's a thought about reality. It's not the same as reality itself. If you're a person who suffers from sunburn and you have sun allergies, it is not a beautiful day for you outside. The reality is the sun is shining. It's a beautiful day is a thought about reality, right? It's a judgment about reality. But we don't see that. We're too close to our thoughts. We're fused with our thoughts. So we just go, it's a beautiful day. That's the truth. And then we don't understand why other people all of a sudden are not just in alignment with that, because to us, it's just the way things are. We don't see it as a construct about the way things are. So thoughts about reality are not the same as reality itself. And we don't see that in the moment when we're having those thoughts. We go, he doesn't respect me. That's a thought about reality. That is not the same as reality itself. Reality itself could be that person wasn't thinking about you. That person was thinking about themselves. That person didn't see it as a respect issue. That person still doesn't see it as being that deep. I mean, we could say 1,000 things about this, right? And that's why we have disagreements, right? Because people are living their own subjective thoughts about reality. Nobody's really touching reality itself.
And so in the context of divorce, you must deal with this like literally every day in the conversations you have, particularly with couples.
100%, or just individuals, quite frankly. Just individuals. I mean, you can tell, and we all have this, right? You and I could sit down right now and make a list of all the places in our lives currently where we have thoughts about reality that probably don't quite line up with objective reality. Right? I mean, it's true. We're meaning-making machines. That's how humans operate. This is not a fault, per se. The only thing we're sort of trying to move towards is to be aware that our thoughts about reality are not the same as reality itself, so we can stop being so confused by why everybody else isn't on our page about reality. And yes, so everybody's doing this all the time, including definitely people who are in the course of some sort of separation or divorce or post-divorce, because they're still trying to make sense out of what happened. And making sense out of what happened is essentially going, XYZ occurred. All right, let me tell you why that is. Because he doesn't respect me. She doesn't like me. He never loved me. Right? Like I'm trying to make sense out of these things that otherwise I don't have an answer for. That's what we do.
How does... I'm thinking through this in the context of the financial aspects of divorce. So this must be intertwined some way, somehow. I mean, like, how are you seeing that? Because, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners that are listening to this right now are thinking like, that's happening. Yes. And there's also the same thing is happening on the financial side in this particular way. Like, how do you see that unfold from a financial perspective in divorce, like with the couples and even the individuals you're working with?
Yes. Well, money is such an interesting added element to what we're talking about because everybody also has a money story, right? Money and finances have deep meaning to people before they ever get involved with someone else and have sort of like conflicting storylines, right? About what money 100%. Means to them, right? Especially
if there's, we see this all the time, but there's usually the one financial decision maker in the household, not to be stereotypical, but it's usually the dude. And then we have, the wife that's along for the ride, or the other spouse that's along for the ride, and they're like, they've got it all handled, and then next thing you know, divorce hits them, and they're like, whoa, I don't have it handled at all. Now I've got to figure this all out and unpack all that too.
Yes, and I think it can go in a million different directions, how this sort of plays out for people. One can be all of a sudden people start reading into financial decisions as having a different meaning than they do. So people might start to interpret like, oh, you did that to hurt me. Oh, you did that so that I wouldn't be able to do this. Oh, right? They start assigning this intention and sort of trajectory to people's behavior that might be true, but might be true is not the same as is true. And the danger is when we start treating it as is true. You end up you're in mediation, something comes up about the finances, right? And one person goes, oh, I see what you're doing, or I see what you did there. And it's like, wait, what? And the other person's going, what did I do there? Right. Yeah, and most times that's not the case. That storyline that this person has in the context of, high emotions and high stakes and difficult experiences, people default to sort of a position of defensiveness and offensiveness of going all of a sudden like, oh, you tried to screw me. You were gonna, and this other person's going like, look, just because we're getting divorced doesn't mean I turned into like the devil here. Like, no,
it's not Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But of course, when your feelings are hurt, and, often in divorce or separation, there are a lot of hurt feelings, there are a lot of hard feelings, right? It becomes very sort of easy for people to retroactively, they're now looking for evidence to confirm that, yes, in fact, this marriage has become a bad thing and this person's a bad person and I should be, and look, there's another piece of evidence. You did this thing and that's, how did I never see that, right? And that fits into this bigger storyline about why they're splitting up. And part of the goal, I think, for any of us, whether it's in a separation or some other complete circumstance, is to not let our feelings sort of dictate how we are categorizing the facts, right? So someone can do something, let's just somebody can make a mistake, a financial mistake, okay? Look, I don't know what a low-level financial mistake would be, but let's just pick one. They blew $1,000 on something dumb. Yeah. And they hid it from the other person, right? Now that's dumb. It's a dumb mistake. People make dumb mistakes all the time, especially with money. And in the course of some conversation here that hadn't been had before, where now there are hard feelings, the second person might look at that financial mistake, that $1,000, and go, oh, "You were hiding things from me. You were trying to get away with something," because that fits the new narrative of we're not friends anymore. Or we don't belong together, or we're not a fit, or you do bad things, or you're selfish, right? Whereas if they weren't under those conditions, they'd be like, well, that was dumb. Could you tell me next time? Right? Yeah. Same fact, two very different storylines.
Two very different responses, yeah.
Represents, and thusly two different responses. And we know that, right? You can ask any small child on a playground, if some small child accidentally gets elbowed in the face by his buddy on the playground, and you tell him, the third friend says like, oh, he didn't mean it, it was an accident, you guys should still be friends, then the kid will be like, okay. And if the other kid tries to hype him up and he's like, he was totally trying to get you and steal your dump truck, the kid's gonna be like, it's on like Donkey Kong. So we know that the stories that we tell ourselves, which is as significant as the stories other people tell us, will absolutely push us in a meaning-making direction that has significant consequences for, do you go politely ask for your dump truck back because you recognize that was an accident, or do you go over there and try and pummel your buddy in the sandbox, right? Like, there's definitely action consequences to those stories that we buy into.
One of the things that in my particular case happened is we went through couples therapy, very early on, and it kind of fell apart, especially when it came down to the financial discussion, which was basically like, hey, we've been talking about you going back to work for like what feels like forever. You don't want to do this. Like here we are. Like, if this doesn't straighten up, we're going to go in a different direction, right? What about, so to help couples that are going, like starting this process and maybe this is the first time that they've worked with a therapist, either individually or as a couple, what are some of the things you want them to be thinking about as they head into that first conversation to help them, maybe communicate better around not only finances, but all the other aspects of their lives, maybe in such a way so they can try to avoid future conflict, right? And try to avoid going to courts and having attorneys involved and so on and so forth. Because we work with so many clients that are going through this experience, which is a tragic experience all the way around, no matter how you slice it. But the ones that are working together to resolve their differences through mediation, which is what we take people through mediation, and it's just an overall better experience. So like, how do we get more people to leverage therapy and share their emotions and communicate better? Like how do we get more people going down that path versus the other path, which is where we help people as an advocate, and we're basically on Team Lindsay, and like you said, like Donkey Kong and the gloves are coming off here. Like that's how we operate as well. But if we can try to avoid those scenarios and get people going, working together, communicating well, and going down the mediation path versus the other path, that would be the ideal scenario. Thoughts on that?
Yes. In the case where everybody's safe and there's not a safety issue, that people are generally emotionally and physically safe, I think one of the most encouraging things we can do is help people understand that ultimately having a calm experience, having as much tranquility as possible is good for everyone. And that if you try and punish this other person, you're also going to punish yourself. Mm-hmm. There is no way you don't get punished in the process of trying to punish someone else. It's inevitable. It may just be emotionally punishing, but emotionally punishing is bad. And you both are going to have to go on and live your lives, right? And an important question is like, hey, after this is all over, how are you? And how can we set you up for success as an individual going forward, even if it's without this person, right? You're going to have a life after this separation, and we want you to have a happy, healthy life. And part of that happy, healthy life is owning your own stuff and communicating like an adult. And to the degree that you can practice that skill throughout the course of this very, very difficult process is going to be helpful to you in the long run. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really helpful for people, if possible, to see an individual therapist as well as maybe like a couples therapist.
That's a good point.
Going through this, because there are some things that people would benefit from metabolizing, as it were, processing they call it, but I call it metabolizing, that aren't constructive to metabolize in front of the other person. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to get it off your chest. But getting it off your chest in front of that other person is not going to go somewhere constructive. It is going to have a net loss effect on the productivity of this process. So you need a different outlet away from that person to talk about those things so that you can come back to the group interaction and show up and be constructive. And so I would really encourage people to think of getting involved with professionals, whether that's a therapist or a couples therapist or, what you're doing, in mediation and any of these sort of services, as a way to really set yourself up individually for success going forward. And maybe sometimes people have a little bit of like, I'm mad at this person and I'm not going to give them the satisfaction or benefit of me showing up tranquil. No, that's for you. It's better for you. When your blood pressure's lower, that's better for you. It's also more pleasant for the other person, but never mind that. It's better for you. And I think that's really important.
You mentioned working with professionals, and I'm a big fan of that. I talk about that, and any opportunity I get, like, you need to create team you when you're going into this divorce, right? Like, your financial professional, your legal professional, your psychological professional, you name it, surround yourself by all those amazing people. But I want, thinking about professionals. I mean, you work with some pretty high stress individuals, professionals of businesses and such, right? So, like, are there any unique, I guess, financial or emotional challenges that they face? Like, how do they stay in control during their divorce? Because there's a lot at stake.
Sure. Sometimes folks coming from those backgrounds have the hardest time because they're so used to being in control of so much, and so much of this process feels out of control. And I would say that's the biggest challenge those folks face, is accepting that there's not a quick solution. This is not going to get fixed. It's not going to get solved overnight. It's going to be, in most cases, a pretty incremental process, right? That rarely is expeditious. Usually takes a long time. Mm-hmm. And helping people make peace with that, and helping people learn to be in their lives and live their lives and not feel like they're on hiatus until this thing is in the rearview mirror, because we don't know how long that's going to be, right? And sometimes, as you know, it can be really drawn out. So I think helping people think about this process as, yes, something that's happening, and of course it's huge, and of course at different moments it's going to blot out the sun more than others to you, right? And also, how do you keep engaging in your life in a meaningful, building way, and not put your life on hold until this thing is resolved? Because we don't always know when that's going to be.
It's so incredibly tough because, I mean, as the owner of two businesses myself, and I didn't own the businesses while I was going through my divorce, but some things came up, years later. We had to go back to court for different things and what have you. And even that was just challenging. I can't even imagine having to go through like the entirety of my divorce, being the owner of, now just a small company alone was a big deal to me, and very stressful, and had an impact not only on my physical health, but also, certainly my mental health and everything else. Like, these CEOs and these heavy hitters of these big corporations, like, they don't just get to take a day off. And what are some of the practical or tactical tools that we use? I used the word tactical in the lead up to this, because I think with a lot of the work you do is about giving tactical tools to to your clients. So are there anything specific you can share there?
Yes, that takes us a little bit back to the idea of stories and the power of a story and living inside a story. So let me just point something out that's happening for both of us right now. You are in what looks to be a climate controlled environment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. As am I. You have this nice background. The lighting looks good. I mean, are you comfortable right now?
I'm doing pretty good, yeah. And I spend a lot of time at Home Goods, as you can tell. I spend a lot of time on the weekends, Lindsay. I'm only kidding. But
beautiful. It's positively idyllic. Yeah. And so you're very comfortable right now, and I'm very comfortable in my environment, right? You and I could both make ourselves miserable right now simply by thinking about something that upsets us. Mm-hmm. Right? No matter
Absolutely.
how good this is.
I just did it.
There you go.
Did you see my frown when I thought about, I'm not going to say anything, but I thought about this one thing or this one person, and then the
pink elephant. Yes. Yeah. So what I encourage people to notice, and I think this is it is simple, but certainly not easy, and certainly not simplistic, is that often we are fine. Things are fine. You're in your climate-controlled environment. I'm in my climate-controlled environment. It's good. And if it's not good, it's because we've gotten caught up in a story about what's not happening right now. And often people who are going through these major life events, which are legitimately stressful and awful and hard and brutal and grief-inducing and all of those things, spend a lot of time suffering when the thing isn't happening, because it's happening up here. right? So there are folks, for example, who are going through very, very difficult separations, right? With all the components that we could name that cause suffering and grief in separations and the endings of relationships. And there are moments while all that's going on that are perfectly lovely. Except those people aren't experiencing those moments because even though they are fill in the blank at the beach with friends, with doing lovely things, they're not present in that space where everything's lovely because up here they are imagining some terrible conversation they had with this person who had the audacity to say XYZ QRP, or how the next hearing might go at which they might have the audacity to say ABC FYG. Right? Like they are robbing themselves of the good moments where everything's perfectly fine by living the bad moments up here. It's a remarkable thing. You know, your body is always in the present, but your mind can time travel. Right?
100%.
And so the skill that I think is most important for everybody to cultivate, quite frankly, not just folks who are going through what we're talking about, but this is a great example, is to be able to drop yourself into the present and go, you know what? That's not happening right now. I am not in a terrible hearing, mediation, awful whatever at this moment. I'm on the beach. I'm with my kids on the back porch. I'm with my siblings, whatever the thing is. I'm playing around at golf. I'm here and this is good, right? And to be able to notice that when we time travel up here into what's already happened, reliving, right, on loop, the horror show of the mediation last time, or fantasizing on loop about the horror that mediation will be next time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We are putting ourselves through this absolutely unnecessary suffering that's not happening. It's not happening in your office. It's not happening.
And it's so difficult though. Like I've been there. I'm like everything you're describing. I remember I was in Puerto Vallarta with my now wife. I was essentially married, and extended family and some friends and the whole thing. And we were dealing. This was 4 years ago, whatever it was, and we were dealing with some situation going back to court and everything else. And I'm like, I just could not enjoy myself the whole time. Like it
totally
took, I physically, I remember having this physical sensation where it took me 4 days of a 7-day vacation to finally feel like I can relax just in time to start thinking about getting back on the airplane to go back to the, I'll just say it, the shitstorm that I was facing when I got home. It's so difficult though.
It is difficult. And part of what makes it difficult, do you remember we were talking a few minutes ago about not noticing that you're treating your thoughts about reality as reality itself?
Yeah.
When we can start to do that, when we can go, oh, I'm not in a court hearing, I'm thinking about a court hearing, we start to distance ourselves. It's the same thing that happens when I don't know if you watch horror movies or action movies or what, but do you watch horror movies or action movies?
I'm not a big horror guy, but I could do action movies for sure.
Action movies?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're in a movie theater, okay? And you're watching the latest Mission Impossible, and there's poor old Tom Cruise hanging from a helicopter rudder, right? And his fingers are like, like slowly coming open, right? And you're like, your heart rate's going up. That's why these movies are fun, because they elicit a physiological response called a thrill. That's why I call them thrillers in this genre, right? Or horrors in that genre. And so there's Tom Cruise slowly losing his grip on this helicopter rudder, and you're like, oh no, this is the end for Tom. Oh no. And your heart's pounding away and you're getting a little sweaty. And then all of a sudden your kid throws a piece of popcorn at the side of your face and you're like, ah! And all of a sudden you're brought back to reality. Oh, this is a movie. Nobody ever watched somebody fall out of a helicopter and ate popcorn at the same time. That's not a thing. Or nobody ever watched vampires take over a town while they were eating Junior Mints and slurping Diet Coke. That's not a thing, right? And so just like watching a horror movie that your physiology gets caught up in because your neurology doesn't know the difference between a movie and a real thing. It elicits the same response in your neurology. That's why thrillers and horror movie work, is your body doesn't care if you're eating popcorn. It's like, that person's getting slashed, right? And you have this response. If we can start to cultivate the skill of sort of noticing that we're caught up in the mind movie, Okay. It's the same thing that happens when you're caught up in a dream. You're having a bad dream, right? You're falling through space, or you're being chased, and it's terrible and your heart's pounding, and all of a sudden you wake up and you go, oh, that's not happening right now. I'm in my bedroom. There's my stuffed animal. There's my dog. There's my spouse. Whatever, right? And all of a sudden you've woken up from the dream. And you're very aware suddenly that one thing is real and one thing is not real. And you go, oh God, that felt so real. Oh, that was so awful, right? I really felt like I was being chased by a Yeti or whatever you were being chased by in your dream. And similarly, we can learn to wake ourselves up from these mind dreams in which we're being chased by a Yeti or in terrible mediation or reliving terrible.
Yeah.
That is the same waking experience as having a bad dream that you just need to be able to wake yourself up from and remind yourself, oh, wow, that's not happening right now. I'm here. I'm on the beach. I'm in Puerto Vallarta. That was literally a waking dream. And that's the skill that we're trying to cultivate.
Oh, well, where were you 5 years ago? I could have used your help on that, especially on that trip. I would have had to phone a friend for sure. So we've covered a lot, and this has been amazing. Are there any? This is what I would call the carte blanche segment of our chat today. Is there anything? Maybe any questions I didn't ask I should have? Anything we want to share that we didn't touch on today for our listeners? Well,
maybe we might just talk a second about how you wake yourself up from a waking dream. Right? Because interestingly, if you're having a bad dream at night while you're sleeping, what usually wakes you up? Somebody's elbowing you, going, hey, stop it, you're thrashing around, right? Or luckily there's a sound in your room, or your pet makes a sound and you wake up and roll over. You sort of wake, or some people have learned to wake themselves up out of bad dreams, right? But we sort of rely on chance to be woken up from a bad dream at night, right? Somebody else or a sound or something, or we just wake up. How can we wake ourselves up from these waking bad dreams that keep us caught up in a mind movie, a waking mind movie that's basically a horror movie and robs us of our time on the beach, right? You want to be in Puerto Vallarta on the beach when you're in Puerto Vallarta on the beach. You want to be experiencing that. You don't want to be somewhere else dreaming about this horror show of whatever's coming up, right? So the question of how do we do that comes down to a really basic skill. And the basic skill is anchoring ourselves in the here and now. Anchoring ourselves in the here and now. Making sure that the contents of our mind are full of the same place that the body is, in the present. How do we make our minds full of Puerto Vallarta when our bodies are in Puerto Vallarta, instead of our minds being full of some horror show of a hearing that might happen? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you might notice that I said, how do we make our minds full of? And if you run all those words together, you get the word mindful. Mindful.
Yeah.
The question, the word mindful, which people have various connotations about at its most basic level, just is asking the question, what is your mind full of at any given moment? Is it full of beach and sand and sunshine because that's where you are and what you're doing? Or is it full of garbage about the past and the future? There's a wonderful comic. It's a one-frame comic. It's one of my favorites. And in it, there's a guy and a dog, and they're in a park, okay? And the park has this beautiful oak tree and birds and flowers and all sorts of interesting stuff. And the dog is sitting, you're looking at them from the back, and the guy is sitting on a bench, and the dog's sitting next to him, right? And the guy and the dog both have a thought bubble. And in the dog's thought bubble is the exact same scene. It's the guy and the dog and the bench and the park. The dog's mind is full of where they are and what they're doing. The guy's thought bubble is full of everything else. It's full of like his car, his job, finances, everything but what's going on. So the dog's mind is full of what's happening in that moment. And the guy's mind is full of garbage that is not happening in that moment, that he has dragged into that moment simply by thinking about it.
Oh, I have not seen this, but I have the visual in my brain, and I hopefully our listeners do as well. I mean, that's an incredible, amazing image for us to take away. So thank you for this great conversation today.
Michael Singer, great book recommendation. Michael Singer.
Okay.
The first 4 chapters of Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, which I know that name is sort of like vague and like, well, I don't know, sounds religious or spiritual. It is not. I haven't actually read the rest of the book because I didn't care. The first section, which is the first 4 chapters, are all about thinking and how thinking is a narration technique that gives us a sense of control, and how we get caught up in the mind movies. And I highly recommend those first 4 chapters, 3 or 4 chapters, just the first section of Michael Singer's book, for a really down-to-earth, wonderful description of what we're talking about and how to start popping out of the mind movie.
Tell me the name of the book again, just so listeners can jot that down.
The Untethered Soul.
The Untethered Soul. Okay.
Yes. I truly don't know what the rest of the book is about. I just want to put that out there. I'm so obsessed with the first 4 chapters, and I've read them again and again and again and again. I have no idea what the rest of the book's about.
I've done that for a few books. You can see it. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. There's a whole bookshelf over here, and I've got about 15 books in there that I've read. I don't know if I've read them cover to cover, but I've definitely read, the most profound chapters I could find, for sure. Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for being with us today and for offering such grounded, practical advice for our listeners. For those of you that are looking for therapy or strategies that can help you maintain and manage your anxiety and improve your decision making while you're going through a divorce, follow Lindsay on Instagram or connect with her on LinkedIn. I'm going to make sure you have all the links in the show notes. So if you're driving, don't worry. You don't have to pull over and jot this down. We'll get you access to all of her links. And as always, if you're looking for support with the financial aspects of your divorce, visit allegiantds.com for guidance. Don't forget to subscribe to Broke Up, Not Broken for more conversations that help you rebuild emotionally and financially. Until next time.